The quiet hum of a neighborhood can hide storms no one dares to name. Kevin and Ruth looked like the kind of couple who'd beaten the odds, their laughter echoing at block parties, their plans penciled in for a wedding by the lake. Friends whispered envy at their easy intimacy. Neighbors watched with fond smiles. Yet beneath the soft glow of their evenings together, a fragile crack had begun to form, almost invisible but growing. That's where our story begins, inside the gap between what the world sees and what's truly unfolding. What happens when the person you trust most begins to slip away behind unspoken secrets? How do you hold on to love when your hands start to tremble under its weight? The answers live in the shadows of choices, confession, painful reckonings, where loyalty collides with betrayal. This isn't just about Kevin and Ruth. It's about how ordinary hearts break in extraordinary ways, and how the echoes of those breaks can still guide someone toward their own kind of truth. Every glance, every missed call, every silence at the dinner table pulls you deeper into their lives. As the curtain lifts on this seemingly perfect relationship, you'll find yourself leaning closer, searching for clues and bracing for what comes next. Behind closed doors and unanswered messages, their future, maybe yours, turns on a single fragile question. How much can love survive before it shatters? You're not just watching a story, you're stepping into it. Each moment you'll see is real enough to sting, familiar enough to unsettle, and intimate enough to make you wonder where you'd stand were you. So settle in, but don't settle too much. The truth about Kevin and Ruth doesn't stay still for long. Kevin held Ruth's hand at the block party, and it looked like a promise. Neighbors clapped when the band played their song under the string light. He whispered easy jokes that made her tilt her head and glow. They shared plans about a small ceremony in late summer by the lake. Valerie smiled from the porch and called them a match stitched by fate. Kevin carried folding chairs and Ruth brought lemonade for everyone. Their laughter rose above the music like bright birds that no one guessed. Quiet ripple already moved beneath the surface. On Sunday mornings, they walked to the farmer's market before the heat. He chose strawberries, he bargained for flowers, a playful grin. They mapped a future in soft pencil on the back of a receipt, a rental near the park, then a starter home with a creaking gate. He pictured a tiny office where he could work near a window. She imagined a sunlit kitchen and a blue kettle always singing. Friends said they looked like people who had outrun every storm. The sky above them seemed steady and generous and endlessly clear. Photos collected on their phones like seashells saved from a trip. Ruth touched the screen at bedtime and said, "Save this one too." They raised toasts at birthdays and promised to make time for picnic. Kevin practiced a first dance in the hallway with socks. He felt the rhythm and thought, this is what a life can feel like. Valerie framed a candid and placed it beside the family. Brian appeared only as a stranger passing in, a distant crowd. Nothing in those images warned them that light can also cast shadows. Their friends in the building spoke with warm certainty. People liked how Ruth tucked her hair behind her ear when she listened. They liked how Kevin remembered everyone's coffee orders perfectly. Even the florist said she kept extra lilies for their visits. Keys jingled on their hooks like a small choir near the door. A planner lay open on the table, brimming with gentle ambition. They circled date and doodled stars around the word wedding. The ink looked dry and permanent and ready for a happy stamp. At night, they watched old films and paused for favorite lines. Kevin would rewind a scene just to hear Ruth laugh again. They stacked bowls in the sink and promised to leave them till morning. They believed in a kindness would multiply without asking. Ruth placed sticky notes with bright reminders along the fridge. Buy peaches on Thursday and call Valerie and choose a humming. Conditioner stitched a calm thread through the room. Peace felt like a chair that never wobbled and never broke. Weekdays moved with a rhythm that soothed and reassured Ruth. Texted "Good morning sunshine" with a trail of small hearts. Kevin replied with a photo of coffee steam near the window. They traded small victories, coins, in a friendly game, made the train with seconds to spare, and fixed the squeaky drawer, found a parking spot on the first try, and beat the rain home. Each tiny moment felt like proof that fortune had chosen. Inside, a narrow door waited, and no one noticed it open. They met neighbors for trivia nights at the pub on the corner. Ruth loved the music round, and Kevin ruled the history questions. They won once and stuck the paper crown on the refrigerator. Everyone cheered and said, "This is your season. Do not blink." Valerie kept a folder of venues and called it the Dream Book. She whispered a prayer that love would hold fast everything. Ruth squeezed Kevin's arm and said, "We are really doing this." He nodded with a glow that looked as real as morning light. Even the city seemed to agree with their momentum. Traffic lights favored them and benches opened just when they arrived. A breeze lifted the curtain and made the room smell like rain. Kevin folded a blanket over the couch and felt planned and ready. Ruth bookmarked recipes and pictured dinners with candles that did not drip. They spoke about rings that would feel simple and right and true. Time walked alongside them like a faithful. Somewhere behind that stroll, a step began to falter out of view. Sunday dinners at Valerie's house became a gentle ritual. She served roast chicken and asked about guest lists and colors. Kevin washed dishes while Ruth dried and stacked them neat. The three of them moved like a practiced trio in a quiet song. They laughed at a memory of a blown fuse during a storm. Valerie said storms pass, and good roofs hold, and love seals the edges. Kevin felt a pinch of worry that had no shape or name. He told himself to breathe and let the warmth of the kitchen. Late one evening, Ruth saw the ceiling and did not. Kevin traced patterns on her palm and waited for a smile. She turned to him and said she was fine, just very tired late. He kissed her forehead and believed he understood the weight of days. Outside, a siren drifted and then melted into ordinary quiet. The clock ticked, the patience that sounded almost kind. Their apartment exhaled a comfort that had always felt safe. In the pause between breaths, the story tilted by a delicate degree. Ruth's absence started as a whisper, the kind Kevin could brush off with a smile. She sent a short message about staying late at a meeting, adding a heart at the end. But the hours stretched, and the heart felt like a bandage over something deeper. Valerie asked softly if everything was fine, but Kevin waved her concern away. The neighbors, once full of wedding talk, now watched through half-closed blinds. At night, the sound of the fridge filled the silence where her voice should have been. He traced the kitchen tiles with his eye, counting squares to avoid darker. Each count pulled him closer to a question he didn't want to. Little contradictions began to line up like pins in a row. Receipts from places Ruth never mentioned appeared in her. Kevin told himself she deserved privacy, but doubt pressed against the edges. He remembered how her smile once landed on him like a steady hand. Now it flickered, distant, like a light in frosted glass. Valerie noticed Ruth's stories had small gaps between them, unspoken pauses. Brian's name surfaced casually at a dinner and vanished just as quickly. The air thickened with questions Kevin could not yet ask aloud. Calls that used to come with warmth now came with static excuses. She picked up later, spoke fast, hung up sooner. Kevin replayed the sound of her voice, searching for cracks he could name. The apartment held her perfume, but not her presence. He caught himself rehearsing lines in the mirror, wondering how to confront. Valerie left gentle hints about trust and self-respect. Kevin placed his phone face down, but always within reach. The silence became a companion, heavy and alert. Old routines lost their glow. Their favorite cafe felt like a stage without actors. Kevin ordered alone and stirred sugar into a single cup. He stared at the door, waiting for Ruth to walk in with her easy laugh. Instead, time walked past him carrying strangers' faces. Evening stretched like corridors with no clear exit. He turned to Valerie, who gave a look that asked without words. They both sensed the pivot, though neither spoke it. Small details betrayed larger truths. A new scent on Ruth's jacket and hers. An unfamiliar song humming from her phone. Late-night notifications she tilted away from his eye. Kevin wondered if he'd missed the first signal months ago. He recalled her lingering at windows, eyes on something unseen. Valerie's soft sighs in the kitchen became another language. Every sound felt coded, and Kevin couldn't break it. He checked his own reflection for blame. Maybe he had grown too certain, too at ease. He remembered the early days, how he noticed every flicker of her mood. Now he struggled to at all. Valerie whispered about how they never lied. Kevin bit his lip and nodded. His heart, once steady, learned a nervous rhythm. The question kept pacing at the edge of his work. No longer distracted. He left files half done, glanced at his phone in meetings. Friends invited him out. Excuses. He walked instead, retracing streets. They'd laughed. Each step felt like a search for a missing landmark. At home, the walls listened but did not answer. Valerie began cooking extra, hoping the smell might anchor him. Even the food tasted like waiting. Night after night, he scrolled through old messages. They felt like relics from another era. He remembered how Ruth once wrote paragraphs, now only single lines. He imagined her somewhere with Brian, a name turning sharp in his mouth. He asked himself what loyalty meant when it started to thin. Valerie urged patience, but her eyes showed fear. Kevin rehearsed what he'd say if the truth came out. Each rehearsal left him colder than before. A sense of being watched settled over him, not by strangers but by his own conscience. He noticed things twice, then 3 times, testing if they were real. A misplaced earring, a late return, a scent of wine on her breath. Valerie caught his hand one evening and said, "You can't keep doing this." He nodded, but still waited, hoping for a clean explanation. He told himself that love bends, it does not vanish, yet he felt the bend turning into a break. In the quiet after midnight, Kevin sat alone on the couch. The TV flickered without sound, casting pale light over his face. He thought of Ruth's smile as a lighthouse he could still reach, but the beam had thinned to a thread and the tide was right. He imagined opening the door and finding her there, eyes full of truth. He imagined the opposite, a door swinging into emptiness. The apartment breathed around him, steady but indifferent. He stared at his phone, the glow waiting for the next message. Kevin's fingers hovered above his phone, his thumb trembling before pressing call. Ruth's voicemail picked up with a cheerful tone that felt like a stranger's echo. He tried again, this time a longer ring, the sound stretching into an accusation. Valerie watched from across the room, her eyes carrying something unspoken. She reached for a glass of, but her hand shook. Kevin ended the call and whispered something. The apartment seemed to contract, each wall leaning. A name flickered in his mind before he could stop it. Brian. Valerie broke her words slow and heavy. She said she had seen Ruth's car parked outside a small cafe near the river. Kevin frowned. Ruth had told him she had a late client. He asked who she was with, and Valerie hesitated, then spoke the name. The sound of Brian's name was a door swinging open with a rush of cold air. Kevin stared at his phone as if it rewrote its messages replayed into like a reel, revealing subtle shifts. Each shift now pointed to his next call went to Valerie's quickly. She said Ruth had been meeting Brian for Kevin's breath caught like a stitch, pulled too tight. He asked why, and Valerie whispered about financial a man's promise. Kevin closed his eyes, remembering Ruth's new dresses, her quiet withdrawals. The details aligned like a cruel constellation. Nothing in his world looked the same after those words. He scrolled back through old texts, hunting for signs. There were vague references to projects and late nights and clients, each now read like a code he had failed to decipher. The heart emojis looked sarcastic, their warmth drained. Kevin tapped the screen harder, as if force could reveal more truth. Valerie sent him a photo she'd taken at Ruth's unmistakable silhouette. Next to her stood Brian, head bent close, hand on her arm. The image burned into Kevin's mind like a permanent mark. He played voicemails over and over, searching for a tremor in her tone. There it was, small pause she loved. He wondered how he had missed it, how habit-blind. Valerie murmured on the line, telling him he had done nothing wrong. But Kevin felt complicit, as if trust itself had been careless. He opened the drawer where Ruth's letters lay folded and under ink, their promises brittle. In the stillness, his heart hammered. Kevin's nights became interrogations without witness. He replayed each evening she had come home late, each excuse she had made. He pictured her in Brian's car, Brian's hands on the wheel, Ruth's laughter soft. Valerie called again, urging him to rest, but his mind refused to close. He asked himself whether Ruth's love had ever been whole or just a mask. The apartment's shadows stretched into shapes that looked like accusation. He pressed his palms to his eyes until he saw sparks of color. They felt like fragments of the life he... Work meetings blurred into background noise. He drafted emails but never sent them, fingers hovering above keys. Valerie texted updates in short bursts, each one heavier than the last. Kevin imagined confronting Ruth and hearing an admission, a tear, a plea. Yet he also imagined denial, anger, a storm he might not survive. Brian's face grew sharper in his mind, though he barely knew him. Ruth's face, once a refuge, became a puzzle of expressions he couldn't read. The distance between what he saw and what he knew widened each hour. He started following small trails without telling anyone, checked bank statements for patterns, matched them to her absences, drove by places she might be, saw only strangers. Valerie warned him to be careful. He felt driven. He thought of the wedding invitations still unsent in their drawer, They felt absurd now, like props from a play that had ended. He wondered if Ruth had rehearsed her lines with Brian too. The thought tasted like ash his tongue. When Ruth finally answered a call, her voice was thin and distracted. Kevin asked where she was. She gave an address that did not exist. He caught the lie immediately, yet he played along. Valerie whispered through another line, coaching him to breathe. He asked if she was happy, and silence came back as the only reply. Then a car horn blared, muffled voices, and the line. Kevin stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. The world tilted, waiting for the inevitable crash. At dawn, he sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in his hand. The room smelled faintly of Ruth's perfume and city dust. He thought of the first night they had dreamed about their future together. Now he sat in a present he barely recognized. Valerie texted one last time, "She's with Brian again." Kevin felt the words settle over him, a slow avalanche. He wanted to scream, but only a low sound escaped. Something inside him shifted, preparing for what had to come next. The evening cracked open like thin glass when Kevin's friend dropped the news. They were sitting at a dimly lit diner, coffee cooling between their hands. The friend's eyes darted toward the window. Unable to meet Kevin's he whispered that his wife was pregnant. Timing, the words landed heavy. Each syllable a weight Kevin could almost. Outside, neon lights flickered, making the street look uncertain. Kevin shifted in his seat, feeling the floor tilt under him. The friend leaned closer, voice breaking, and said there might be another father. Kevin tried to absorb the confession, but his pulse roared too loud. He heard phrases like mistakes made and pressure I couldn't handle. It blurred into one long thread of guilt and the mention of Ruth came almost like an accident. A name slipped in. Kevin's head snapped up, eyes sharpening at the sound. The friend swallowed hard, confirming with a nod he couldn't take back. There was more than one betrayal woven into this night. A pattern Kevin had dreaded now drew itself in front of him. He pressed for details he wasn't sure he wanted. The friend's hands trembled as he spoke of a hidden affair. He said Ruth had been seen with Brian again, this time at a motel. He confessed that people had known, whispered, even warned. Kevin's stomach knotted, his knuckles whitening against the table. Every memory of Ruth now flickered with a different light. Valerie's warnings resurfaced, echoing like a chorus he had ignored. He stared at the friend as if words could reverse their direction. The diner's air thickened with the scent of burnt toast and regret. Kevin leaned back, fighting the urge to stand and walk out. He pictured Ruth's smile, once an anchor, now a blade. The friend's story sprawled on, like a grim tapestry. He spoke of pressure, of promises made in the dark. He mentioned threats about finances, debts owed, favors exchanged. Kevin's mind snatched at the pieces but found no safe place to hold them. Each word peeled another layer off the life he thought he knew. He felt a strange calm slide over him, like ice on the back of his neck. The friend said Ruth had admitted doubts about the baby's father. Kevin's breath came shallow, his fingers pressed to his temples. He remembered the ultrasound photo she'd shown him with a trembling smile. Now he saw it through a cracked lens, wondering whose child it truly was. The friend's voice dropped lower, warning Kevin to brace himself. The next admission could change everything. Kevin nodded, silent, his gaze locked on the table's cards. The friend's eyes watered as he spoke of hidden meetings and secret calls. He described Ruth crying after leaving Brian, yet returning again. He said she talked about being trapped, about feeling she had no choice. Kevin tried to summon anger but found only exhaustion. He thought about the nights he had worked late to save for their wedding. The friend's words clung to him like wet fabric. Valerie's photo of Ruth and Brian replayed behind his eyes. A shape of truth emerged that could not be pushed back into shadow. Kevin imagined confronting Ruth, demanding clarity and ownership. He pictured her face shifting from defiance to guilt to relief. But he also saw himself breaking apart under her hand. The friend warned him the confrontation could spiral, urged caution. Kevin thought of the child, an innocent orbiting. He wondered if fatherhood meant something, even when blood betrayed him. The idea of walking away felt tearing my bone, yet staying felt like breathing underwater. The friend confessed his own shame, saying he should have told Kevin sooner. He spoke of sleepless nights, of weighing loyalty against honesty. Kevin listened without looking up, hands clasped tight. The diner's soundtrack of clinking cutlery and low chatter felt surreal. He asked for a single truth, something he could hold on to. The friend said the only truth was Ruth's double life. Kevin's jaw clenched as he inhaled slowly through his nose. His silence became its own kind of testimony. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, steady and cold. Kevin stared at the droplets, merging and racing down the glass. He felt each one as a marker of time lost, of trust dissolved. He asked if Ruth had ever spoken about leaving him. The friend said no. She wanted the comfort of both worlds. Kevin's heart stumbled at that thought. A betrayal inside a betrayal. The rain darkened the sidewalk, making reflections stretch and twist. He rose slowly, his chair scraping like a verdict. As he stepped outside, the night smelled of wet asphalt and unanswered questions. He pictured Ruth at home or somewhere else, entirely unaware of this conversation. Valerie's text still waited on his phone like small bombs. Kevin felt the weight of what he now knew settling into his chest. The streetlights flickered above, casting uneven halos. He walked without direction, thinking of vows, promises, and the child caught between. The air pressed against him, heavy with decision to be made. In the distance, thunder rolled, hinting at a break he could no longer avoid. Kevin stood in the hallway, his hand hovering over the doorknob as if the weight of it could crush him. Inside, the apartment felt smaller, walls closing like slow tide. Ruth sat on the edge of the bed, eyes low, fingers whirring a strand of hair. He wanted to scream, to demand, to pull the truth out of her, but his voice stalled. The silence between them pulsed louder than any confession. He remembered the first time he'd seen her. Now, strange, a child she'd hovered in his like a friend. He told himself he needed an answer before his heart could move. Ruth's lips, no words. Kevin asked if the baby was his voice trembling, steady, and she looked toward her. In that moment, Kevin felt something inside him split. At a clean break, he thought of Valerie, of late-night texts and warnings. Brian, a shadow, become a man, a claim. His hands clenched into fists, then opened and clenched. He breathed once, twice, forcing himself to stay in the room. Smelled of damp fabric and tension. Kevin said he couldn't keep living in this. Ruth whispered apologies, but they drifted like paper in the wind. He told her he wouldn't abandon he told her he couldn't stay in a marriage built on shifting ground. Each sentence tasted like iron, like he was biting through chains. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of his words. He turned toward the window, needing distance even within the same air. Valerie's voice echoed from the phone still in his pocket. She had said he deserved clarity, deserved. He had ignored her for weeks, clinging to the image of a home intact. Now that image felt like stained glass shattered on the floor. He pictured himself picking up shards, cutting his fingers, yet still trying. Ruth said she felt trapped, said she had been afraid to tell him sooner. He wondered if fear excused betrayal or only delayed it. His heartbeat moved like a drum calling him to an unknown march. He walked into the kitchen, leaving Ruth alone in the dim bedroom. He touched the table where they had once planned their wedding. He remembered doodles, hearts, small notes about rings and vows. They were gone now, replaced by hostile appointments and whispered doubt. He felt a strange relief under the ache, a sense of clarity. He had tried to hold every thread. Now he had to let go. The refrigerator hummed like a witness unwilling to speak. He closed his eyes and whispered goodbye. When he came back, Ruth sat with her hands on her belly. She asked if he hated her. He said no, but he couldn't stand beside her anymore. He said he would be there for the child, but not for the marriage. His words floated between them, solid and undeniable. Ruth's tears fell fast, staining the hem of her dress. Kevin's own eyes burned but stayed dry. He picked up his jacket, the zipper loud as a crack in the night. Outside, the city's air wrapped around him like a cold cloth. He walked without direction, streets glistening under streetlight. He thought of nights spent imagining a future built on shared dreams. Now he wondered what parts of that future he could salvage. He pictured holding the looking for himself in its face. He pictured Ruth watching from a distance, a memory rather than a partner. The ache pressed against his ribs, but his steps stayed steady. The choice had been made. The pain would follow but not own him. He reached Valerie's door and knocked softly. She opened with eyes that already knew. He said nothing, just stepped inside and sat on her. She brought tea, placed a hand on his shoulder. He stared at the steam rising, thinking of vows as ghosts. Valerie whispered that healing starts with truth. Kevin closed his eyes, hearing Ruth's voice in fragment. He let the silence answer for him. That night he dreamed of a house without walls, the sky open above, wind moving through without barriers. He saw a child running ahead, laughing but out of reach. He reached for it, but his hands closed on air. Ruth stood far away, face hidden in shadow. He woke with his heart pounding, the sheets twisted like ropes. Morning light crept across the floor, slow and pale. He felt emptied, yet anchored, like a ship cut from its moorings. In the days that followed, Kevin moved through routines with new eyes. He packed a small bag, left his key on the table. He arranged to support Ruth and the child, setting boundaries, fences. Valerie helped him draft papers, her quiet voice steadying his hands. He went to work again, the office, a different planet, still turning. Each night he knew apart, waiting for... He knew pain would fade, but not quickly. Still, for the first time in months, a silence. Sometimes the most powerful choices are the ones made in silence. Kevin walked away carrying not just heartbreak, but also a hard-won clarity about love, loyalty, and self-respect. Ruth faced her own reckoning, and somewhere between the pain and the truth, a child would soon arrive, innocent of the chaos that shaped it. This story wasn't about villains. It was about the fragile lines we draw, quiet strength to step over them. And now, it's your turn. How did this story land with you? Do you think Kevin made the right decision? Or would you have chosen differently in his place? What would you say to Ruth if she were standing before you now, asking your forgiveness? Your thoughts, feelings, and perspective are what brings stories to life. Share them below and let us. If you're drawn to stories like this one, filled with real emotion, sharp turns, and human contradiction, there are more waiting for you on the channel. Each one is crafted to touch your heart, stir your curiosity, and keep you coming back for the next revelation. Subscribe, activate the notification, and hit the like button so you don't miss the next journey into lies, complex and moving as Kevin's and Ruth's. Thank you for staying with us until the end. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time!